An example I often use to illustrate the reality of vanity is this. Look at the peacock. It's beautiful if you look at it from the front, but if you look at it from behind, you discover the truth. Whoever gives into such self absorbed vanity has huge misery hiding inside them. Pope Francis.
From atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where it's just about the start of war season, so finish getting those fields planted, get those pikes and halberds sharpened up, because we're going on campaign in 2 weeks. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So good of you to join us this evening. Here is your golden age of Western civilization news roundup for the week ending 25 April 2025. Dayline, Washington, Monday, 21 April. The White House Easter egg roll had a decidedly different vibe and character this year, which probably came as a bitter disappointment if you're the sort of person who enjoys watching the cadaver of Joe Biden cavort with naked transvestites as giant gay pride flags billow from the edge of the Truman balcony. No, this year, the Trump administration took the wildly subversive step of using the same occasion to have little kids hunt for eggs while the president talked about Jesus Christ on the most important day of the Christian liturgical calendar. Imagine that. Oh wait, that wasn't wildly subversive, was it? That was actually what every White House Easter egg roll used to look like up until militant sex perverts captured the central government back in 2021 and set about the very important work of eradicating religion from the public square and, of course, making everything gay. Remember that video I did last year, where I held a little contest to see which federal cabinet department had the ugliest Pride Month logo? Because of course they each had one. And that last Easter egg roll, you know, the one with the naked transvestites, if you look at the wide panoramic shots of that event, one doesn't get the impression that one is looking at a commemoration of Easter Sunday. One gets the impression of a gay pride festival that has a man in a bunny suit stood incongruously in the middle of the scene. But he couldn't stand for long because, you remember, he was busy holding Joe's hand and gently but firmly diverting him away from any inconvenient press inquiries that might happen to arise. And damn it, I still want to know who the hell was in that bunny suit. Because it wasn't some random bunny impersonator, I will tell you that. That guy was a minder. He was very much babysitting and chaperoning the president. If that guy decides to write a tell-all memoir, I volunteer to be the ghostwriter. We will call it Beneath the Ears, Biden's Bunny Spills the Jelly Beans. Now here's a brief excerpt from President Trump's Easter proclamation, and you can imagine how much this upset all the right people. Quote, "We're honoring Jesus Christ, and we're going to honor Jesus Christ very powerfully throughout our lives. All throughout our lives, not just now, all throughout our lives. We're bringing religion back in America. We're bringing a lot of things back, but religion is coming back to America. That's why you see the kind of numbers that you see, the spirit and the kind of numbers that you see. So we're going to come down and join you right now, but I just want to wish everybody once again Happy Easter and enjoy your lives," end quote. Upon being informed of these remarks, Crying Chuck Schumer immediately declared a constitutional crisis, and Whoopi Goldberg exclaimed, "He sounds just like Hitler," end quote. Dateline Vatican City, Tuesday, 22 April. Pope Francis, supreme leader of the Holy and Apostolic Catholic Church and its over 1 billion adherents worldwide, passed away earlier this week at the age of 88, and then, per papal tradition, his unembalmed, moldering corpse was put on public display for the remainder of the week, during which it was viewed by millions of the faithful, some of whom could be heard to remark, "I don't know, I still think he looks better than Biden." Here in America, the usual idiots who somehow still have jobs on television, including the aforementioned Whoopi Goldberg, immediately went into hysterics, as they often do, worrying that the new pope would be less woke than good woke Frank. And while yes, it is true that the late pontiff said some things and harbored some views that were pretty wildly heterodox in terms of things popes have ever said before. I mean, after all, there is a reason I started calling him good woke Frank. But some of our friends on the left seem to be rather highly selective in which of this man's views they choose to listen to and acknowledge and celebrate. And so, as a public service for these folks, here's a couple of Pope Francis quotes on the topics that are nearest and dearest to the hearts of the wokesters. Here's Pope Francis on gay marriage. Quote, "God cannot bless sin." Pope Francis on transgenderism. Quote, "It is the ugliest ideology of our time. Canceling out the differences between men and women means canceling out humanity." End quote. And it goes without saying, obviously, that the man was not a very big fan of abortion or birth control. Really, the only area where the Pope's views were aligned with the views of the globalist left was in the area of migration. The former Jorge Maria Bergoglio was very much a liberation theologist. His views absolutely were influenced by the secular socialist left in 1950s and 60s Argentina. And the most obvious vestige of that was his belief that we shouldn't have any borders, man. They're just lines on maps, man. People should be able to go and live wherever they want, man. Wouldn't that be groovy? And yet, strangely, perhaps incongruously, he reigned as Europe's last absolute monarch over a nation-state with the most walled-off, most heavily policed frontiers in the entire world. So I guess take that wild juxtaposition for what you will. And now we move on to the papal conclave, which is always a fascinating exercise with its peculiar mix of medieval tradition and modern high technology, but it seems like each one goes quicker than the last one did. Because even when you're an 80-year-old Catholic cardinal, not having your smartphone for a few days is pretty much a fate worse than death. So it seems to move things right along, which is probably sort of a good thing. In other words, if you're a betting man, I don't know what the over-under is on the number of days that the conclave is going to take, but I'm saying take the under, and please gamble responsibly. However, if you're betting on shit like that, you probably already have a problem. I'm just saying. Dateline Davos, Wednesday, 23 April. In the most shockingly unexpected story of the week, the founder of an organization designed to enable and facilitate corruption now stands accused of corruption himself. Klaus Schwab, the guy who's been telling you to eat bugs and own no property because you'll be happier for the last 40 years. You'll be eating bugs! Founder and outgoing CEO of the World Economic Forum is reportedly being investigated by the same organization he founded. Insert Vince McMahon joke here. After a whistleblower made a series of very lurid allegations against Herr Schwab and various members of his family and inner circle. And I guess insert another Vince McMahon joke here. The 87-year-old Schwab resigned as chairman of the WEF's board of trustees last Sunday, which leads one to believe that he takes these whistleblower allegations fairly seriously. And I guess insert a third Vince McMahon joke here. The Financial Times reported, quote, "The new claims come on top of others made last year, alleging Schwab presided over a toxic workplace culture where sexual harassment was not properly investigated and black and female employees were discriminated against. In March, WEF reported to sponsors that the earlier investigation did not find that the forum had committed any legal violations and did not substantiate allegations of misconduct against him. The whistleblower additionally alleges that Schwab presided over a workplace culture where older male executives behaved in a sexually boorish manner toward younger female underlings, and that reports of harassment, misconduct, and worse, were routinely hushed up or went uninvestigated altogether." And what a delicious irony this is, don't you think? That a man and an organization that have been seen as the shining lights of modern progressive liberal sensitivity this whole time they've been running an office that wouldn't be out of place on an episode of Mad Men? I mean, at least with Vince McMahon, when he gets accused of doing that sort of shit, it's not that far off from the character he portrays on TV. I don't think anybody read the Vince McMahon allegations and thought, nah, Vince McMahon would never do that. But at least that dude, he never hid his alleged taste for depravity behind a veneer of progressive feminist do-goodery. And I don't know how this is going to shake out for our man Klaus. I mean, nobody can afford better lawyers than that dude can, but I'm guessing you're going to see a lot fewer political and entertainment superstars turning out in Davos for the next edition of that WEF Shangri-La party, whatever the hell they call it. It's just I expect George Clooney is frantically trying to come up with a scheduling conflict as we speak. Sorry, Klaus, I can't make it this year. I just found out I'm shooting a Slim Jim commercial that day. Can you believe it? And you guys see what I just did? I brought you on a journey all the way from Uwe to snap into a Slim Jim. And you're welcome. Dateline London, Thursday, 24 April. In a story that caused deep disappointment to probably no one, the plant-based vegan burger chain started 6 years ago by actor Leo DiCaprio and Formula One driver Sir Lewis Hamilton has sadly been forced to shut down. Probably, and this is just my wild theory, because nobody wants to eat food that tastes like shit and has the consistency of a melted roof shingle. Neat Burger was the name of the chain, which launched to much contrived fanfare in the UK back in 2019, and I say contrived because let's face it, the next time someone gets genuinely excited about eating a plant burger will be the first time. And what was the point of the whole exercise? Well, that's hard to say, really. If it was an attempt to convince connoisseurs of real hamburgers that burgers made out of fucking algae and soybeans and unicorn farts are just as tasty, well, that didn't quite work out. But damn it, it's also about sustainability, said Leo and Sir Lewis back on launch day half a dozen years ago. Because damn it, real hamburgers require slaughtering cattle, and that's just mean. And besides, cow farts one day could render the planet potentially uninhabitable if we don't stop being such a bunch of unreconstructed, bloodthirsty, carnivorous bastards. So we all need to get the hell over it and start enjoying delicious seaweed burgers instead. But the question remains, if you're vegan and vegetarian types, and don't explain the difference to me because I don't care, if they were actually as secure in their dietary choices as they claim to be, why would they have any desire to eat something that resembles a hamburger? And it's only a superficial resemblance, obviously, because you're taking a slab of something that tastes like the sole of a homeless man's shoe and then slathering it with a bunch of hamburger condiments, slapping it between a bun, and hoping against hope you can convince yourself it really tastes like a delicious ground beef patty. In fact, if I didn't know better, I might view the whole vegan burger thing as a tacit admission from our herbivorous friends that they really do have an insatiable desire to consume the delicious flesh of various bovine creatures. Because seriously, if you are a fully committed vegan vegetarian type and you're totally secure with the dietary choices you've made for yourself, Shouldn't you be just as happy as a pig in shit about eating nothing but dirt and roots and berries and salads? If Leo and Sir Lewis wanted to cater to the tastes of that crowd, wouldn't it make more sense to open a salad shack instead of a burger shack? But I guess our self-appointed celebrity overlords are mistaken in their biggest presumption. That through spending enough money and exerting enough political pressure and brute force industrialized shame, they can socially engineer everybody else in the world toward living and thinking and eating the way they think they ought to. Some might call it a disgusting display of class-based paternalism, just like when Klaus Schwab tells you to eat the bugs. Or we could call it a well-intentioned but ultimately doomed effort to save the planet and the human race from the insidious scourge of bovine flatulence. We report, you decide. Dateline Washington, Friday, 25 April. 2 Democrat activist judges were arrested by the FBI this week because they decided they sparkly heart illegal aliens more than they care about being judges. Wisconsin County Judge Hannah Dugan. And when you look at this woman's picture, you can practically smell the crazy dripping off of her. And it also leaves no doubt about what Tim Walz would look like as a drag queen. But she was taken into custody and faces 6 years in prison for actively helping a criminal illegal alien escape the courthouse and evade capture by immigration and customs enforcement. Personally, I never knew it was part of a judge's job to help a dude climb out the back window so he can get away from the federales, but I ain't no fancy lawyer, so maybe this stuff is just all beyond my level. But Judge Hannah, and we probably won't have to call her judge much longer, she does not win the prize for biggest scumbag judge of the week. That honor goes to a former Doña Ana County, New Mexico magistrate by the name of Jose Luis Cano, who sparkly hearts illegal aliens so much he had a couple of wanted Tren de Aragua gang members living in his spare bedroom. And apparently, Judge Cano and his lovely wife Nancy, they've been riding the hobby horse with TDA for quite some time now. Apparently, at least that's the impression one gets from the fact that numerous anonymous tips have come in over the course of many months indicating that Judge and Mrs. Cano's residence has effectively been a Tren de Aragua stash house for some time now, with shady-looking characters coming and going at all hours of the night, weapons and drugs apparently being transported into and out of the house. And are we going to pretend, at a time when we are beset with activist judges attempting to assume the powers of the presidency unto themselves, that these 2 judges are the only crooked ones out there? Well, no, I'm not going to pretend that. I don't know about you. And now, what do Judge Hannah and Judge Jose have in common? Well, they were both woke left-wing activists before they pursued a career on the judicial bench. Judge Hannah, in fact, was the executive director of Catholic Charities, an organization that has now halted its operations while under criminal investigation for enabling and facilitating the foreign invasion that has claimed the lives of more than 500,000 Americans just during Joe Biden's presidency. The point is, when we allege that the Democrats no longer have any compunction about installing corrupt party apparatchiks on the judicial bench, we are not just pissing up a rope, and we ain't just whistling Dixie. It's a real thing. It's been a real problem for quite a while now, and I guarantee you, these 2 cases will not wind up being the worst of it. So does the story have a moral? Well, yes it does. Making an activist into a judge is just as impossible as making a man into a woman. And since I have run out of days in the week, that is the end of the roundup. And with that, I pass the controls over to my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the man-beast from the southeast, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
I'll tell you what, listen. One thing about Ben Shapiro, I ain't never getting on an airplane with that man. He's going to destroy that left wing. How we doing tonight? Welcome to the Blast Radius, where we're going to do some Ben Shapiro-izing. We got a whole lot to get through, so we're not going to do a whole lot on the intro. How's the week treating you, bro?
We got to talk about Muscle Shirt Jesus. Week's treating me all right. How's the week treating you?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm under the impression, and I've only heard two people, you and another individual, talk about this particular interview. And what I get is essentially word salad Kamala Harris would be proud of.
Yes, or it might make her blush. And also we have to put out this disclaimer, I think, right at the top, because in cases like this, it is always difficult trying to discern whether the interview subject is being badly served by the translator or whether he really sounds this idiotic. But I think in this case, I'm going to err on the side of he really does sound that idiotic, because some of it has the flavor of a Kamala Harris interview, because it's just saying words and words and as many words as possible, just trying to run out the clock. I'm just saying words and saying words and saying words, and sometimes it comes off completely incorrect. Sometimes it even sounds like a Vladimir Putin interview. And I know little Z would hate me for saying that, but if you remember the interview that Putin did with Tucker Carlson not long ago, and Tucker asks him the first question, and Putin starts back in the year 1100 AD and takes you on a guided tour through the entire history of the Slavic peoples, and he finishes 25 minutes later, nobody remembers what the question actually was. It is just saying words, saying words, saying words, run out the clock. Don't give a straight answer to anything. The point being, I think it is impossible to view both parts of this interview and take this man seriously any longer as a diplomatic broker on the world stage.
He's pretty much coming into this with exactly the same script he had 4 years ago. Nothing has changed. Nothing has advanced. No movement has taken place in thought processes. There's been no growth. And that's where we're at.
One gets the impression that we are at the point now where this is just two dictators trying to outlast each other. It is a post-Soviet dick measuring contest.
Right.
Zelensky wants to outlast Putin. Putin wants to outlast Zelensky. Go ahead, hit play.
I just realized that Ben Shapiro talks so fast to begin with. This is going to sound like Chipmunks. I didn't even think about it just now.
I can't say anything about talking fast.
So I want to start by asking you about the meeting you had in the Oval Office with the president and the vice president. This is almost a couple of months ago. Obviously, things went sideways. How do you feel that you could have handled things better with the president and vice president?
After this meeting, our teams had plenty of meetings. Well, not enough of meetings to put an end to this war, but still there were positive meetings. There were meetings that were fruitful, and our teams have agreed that everyone will support the complete ceasefire mode, and that was a meeting in Saudi Arabia. Then there was another meeting, then it was a meeting in France. Tomorrow, by the way, there will be a meeting in London. So as you can see, that what's important to us is the teams of Ukraine and the United States, plus our European colleagues. That is, our team has started to work together with the United States, and I can see some positive things about this. I'm grateful to all the partners, and I'm grateful to President Trump for this, as well as to Keir Starmer and to the Emmanuel Macron and to all the leaders who constantly support this very beginning, the complete ceasefire. It's the beginning of the path towards the stable and hopefully fair and just peace, and that is why I think we.
What
the question is, how could you have handled that Oval Office fiasco better? And the answer never even attempts to be responsive to the question. We have meetings. We had lots of meetings. We've had very productive meetings, many meetings. We've had meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings and meetings. Thank you.
Yeah, more meetings. Gotcha. You met with a bunch of people, begged for a bunch of money. How's that going?
Yeah, but let's talk about the fact that you acted like a jackass and shot yourself in the fucking foot in the middle of the Oval Office in front of the world press. I guess it's natural that he wouldn't want to talk about that, but the question was about that, and it makes you look like a fool when you divert away from it that quickly and don't even attempt to respond to it.
You do have good meetings right now, and I would say good possibilities. Now the question is Russia, and that is the only element in this construct that is not yet ready to put an end to this war, and we hope on the strengths of the United States, on the strengths in terms of the sanctions, on the experience of the United States, and the influence that United States.
Hold up, homie just said we have hopes on the strength of the United States.
Yes. And he hasn't even gotten into the part yet where he lectures us about how we have to hate Russia and Russians. Which is the part that really chaps my ass, as I told you yesterday. I do not like it when a foreign leader tells me who I have to hate.
Has on Russia. So for the Russia to agree to put an end to this war, it depends on them. As for our meeting in the Oval Office, I kept saying that we needed this meeting. We had to talk over a variety of elements. We had different meetings, fruitful and more philosophic meetings, I would say, on different stages of our life, and the meeting with President Trump as well. So I think that the meeting in the Oval Office, it did not help Ukraine. It did not help to the United States. And no, and I think we should, when Ukraine and the United States are having the meeting, we should give light to people. We should demonstrate this path that I've already mentioned, to a path towards the end of this war. We count on the strategic partnership. We always respected the people of the United States and the choice of the United States and the support coming from the United States. And that is why I think that we will have more fruitful meetings with President Trump. But you have to understand, Ukraine, that we are defending against the Russia's offense, and we believe.
Is this where the propaganda starts? So did we start with the propaganda before? I don't know. I didn't have my decoder ring out.
No, it's been pretty tame so far, but still stupid, and it gets worse as we go along. And he gets, you can tell that he gets increasingly flustered and unsure of what to say, and I just, as I said before, I don't have any faith in this man's ability to be a broker in negotiating any sort of coherent peace deal. I think he is over his head and beyond his capability. I think they need a leadership change in Kiev.
I don't think he's interested in peace.
No. He doesn't have to be accountable to the voters anymore because he's canceled all future elections.
Right. As long as this war continues, he is in charge, and that is the
exactly.
End.
Yep.
And I just want to say that I don't want to say that on YouTube. My bad.
Russia is an enemy. We believe United States is a true and real friend. We know that the United States has a position to serve as the mediator in this conflict. That is the choice made by the United States, but we consider United States as a strong strategic partner with an influence, and we would really like to have these two strengths that would be used towards Russia, so that the force would be towards the Russia, because they're the one who's the aggressor, and we would like really to have this common understanding that Russia is the aggressor, not we, and we really want.
Am I permitted to mention NATO at all?
Yes, please do.
So there is something of a concern with the Ukraine joining NATO, and that being, kind of verboten for Ukraine, and how that was all signed off on and agreed to until NATO changed its mind and was like, no, we'll accept them, and then proved that they would. So I'm not so sure who the aggressor is here, because if Ukraine joins NATO, then that puts NATO missiles on Russia's front doorstep. Like, within
you are bringing in a new NATO member that is actively at war. So then Article 5 has to be invoked the first day, doesn't it? Or else the treaty doesn't mean anything.
Exactly. It looks like a little dude trying to force the giant's hand.
Yeah, and he wants a I don't know whether you want to call it an off-ramp or what you want to call it, but he wants an eventuality, an end to this thing where he gets to continue having his country be a direct surrogate of the United States and the European Union. He wants that money to keep flowing in. He doesn't care what words have to come out of his mouth to make it happen. And since he's no longer accountable to the voters, then that arrangement would pretty much set him up for life, and he's in power, president for life, basically.
El Presidente. You know how that ends.
Por vida.
Want the United States not to search for the balance in this words. I understand what President Trump is willing to have. I highly respect the fact that he's searching for an approach. That's his approach. Somebody might have different approach, but you shouldn't be saying that Ukraine and Russia started this war. I believe that it's painful for our people to hear, and this is why we respond in this way. We're talking about the dignity of our country. We have demonstrated that we are ready to protect our dignity in any situation. I'm doing that as the president. We have clearly demonstrated that in the beginning of the war. It was the war. It still remains the war. We have only one enemy, Russia and Putin, and that is why, even if we're talking a diplomatic environment, everything that is related to the Ukraine's dignity, I will always defend it. This is my job. I'm the president. I'm the guarantor of the Constitution of Ukraine.
So, Mr. President.
The Constitution of Ukraine says we have elections, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I
Saying.
was kind of thinking about. What's up, Matthew? I get the impression this man's going to try to salt word salad for the next 4 years.
Yes, absolutely. And then this whole interview is just an exercise in stonewalling, and like we said, running out the clock and saying as little as possible while doing it.
Right.
But I still, nonetheless, I think it is important that we hear these things directly out of the mouths of the leaders of the countries that are involved in the thing, because I don't think there's a good way to get a functional handle on the situation just by hearing what our media tell us, because our media are idiots with an agenda. And they want us to believe that this thing is. Remember the kindergarten level explanation that Kamala Harris gave of the Russia-Ukraine war last year? Well, Russia is a big country and Ukraine is a little country, and the big country invaded the little country, and that's bad. And that's all the analysis she wants to put into it, and that's all the analysis he wants to put into it.
That was fucking beautiful, dude. If that's not a short, I'm gonna hunt you down.
I'll make that a short.
That should be a short. That was gorgeous, bro.
President, there are a lot of questions in the United States about how American funding is spent. So we've spent allocated nearly $200 billion to the defense of Ukraine. There are lots of questions about where the money is going, to pensions, to war profiteering, to corruption. How do you
Look, bro, I made Ukraine out of cocaine.
Yeah. And to what Dyatlov just said, he's correct. Ukraine didn't start the war. The 2014 war never ended. And why did the 2014 war start in the first place? Because that's a very crucial thing we have to talk about. It started in the first place because Hillary Clinton and Susan Rice and Toria Nuland decided it would be a fun project to make Ukraine into an outpost of American progressive liberalism. And they decided to do that. And the result was that over a course of years, the Ukrainian people, election after election, they were given a choice between an American stooge and a Russian stooge. And the Ukrainians didn't like that. And that's how the 2014 war started. And that's the invasion that happened in 22 shouldn't be viewed as the start of a new war, but rather a continuation of the one that already existed.
Extant hostilities. Yeah.
Yes.
to pensions, to war profiteering, to corruption? How do you answer those questions? What kind of transparency can you provide to the American people to guarantee that their taxpayer dollars are being used in the best possible way to fight Russia, to defend Ukraine, and to ensure that if the United States wants, would an audit be possible by the United States of where those dollars are going?
This is a great one coming up.
Yes, let me start with the end of your question. As for the audit, the United States have to understand there's United States inspectors working. There's the inspectors of European countries because they've also allocated the money, and we are also grateful to them. Just as to the United States, we highly respect the support and assistance coming from the people of the United States as well as the people of Europe. That is why we have told at once that we are ready to have any inspections from the very beginning of the war. The inspectors coming from the United States, Europe, and our own inspectors, they're working. We have complete reporting, counting, absolutely transparent within the Ministry of Defense. There is access to all the figures starting from the very first year of the war. There's been always an access. When we've seen in the very beginning of the war that Russia attempted to undermine the support and assistance coming from the United States, because the United States was the main donor, and they wanted to undermine this through fake news, through other tools. That is why we told at once that we are open, send the inspectors, and they were inspectors. So as for the audit, we're always ready to any audit. There's nothing to hide. We're absolutely open, transparent, and that is what's happening. There's all the reports available. The second aspect, I never wanted to, I was grateful to all the U.S. taxpayers. I understand that the United States have different programs, directions, and that is also related to the weapon support and to the assistance of other countries of the world. I want to be absolutely frank. That's with regards to the audit. I have my own internal audit, and I clearly understand.
It's cool, guys. Don't worry. I've done my own internal audit, and everything's fine. Just keep sending the money. We're good.
That was a 2-minute tirade of trust me, bro.
Yes, that is exactly what that was. As he's growing increasingly nervous and agitated the whole time, because I can't say anything that causes them to turn off the tap and make the cash stop flowing. It's okay. It's fine. You don't need to do an audit. I did my own audit. I found out everything is cool, so we're good. Just keep sending those checks, baby.
Oh, don't let it stop.
That's a good frame you froze on. Just look at that face.
Country at which moment was provided to Ukraine. I'm not responding fully to saying that United States has transferred something around 200 billion. I'm responding to the facts. The United States could be, registering that, could be voting, and we are grateful to the bipartisan support in the Congress because we are grateful to this unity around the fight of Ukraine for the independence and your great assistance and the great contribution of the United States in the defense of our people. But I have my own internal audit, and my country is clearly documenting how many assistance was provided. Just for you to know, we had 105 billion US dollars. Most of those money were in the form of weapons. Now, that's first thing. All of those weapons came. The money were paid to the transportation of those weapons. Ukrainian companies were not allowed to transport this money. That's why we haven't received, not in the public, not in the private sector, the money for the transportation. There were different assistance programs, the training of Ukrainian soldiers abroad. There's many things. I'm not.
The words keep coming faster and faster and faster, almost like he's getting more agitated, like he's unsure of what. Well, we've had meetings and meetings and meetings and so many meetings, and our meetings were great, and we had inspectors and audits and say words, keep saying words, just say words. But you know what bothered? I mean, in the entire hour plus of this interview, there's only really about half a dozen questions that Shapiro gets in. He doesn't ask any follow-ups, which is kind of a problem, but there are two questions I would submit, probably the two most serious questions with the most gravity that don't get asked. The first question is, when is the next election? The second question is, what version of peace are you happy with? Neither of those questions get asked or addressed.
Documenting and registering what we have. I understand there could be different calculations, different assistance programs or aid programs, but this is like an audit, really. You are verifying what was the output, so to say, and we kind of verify what was the input. We verify this because we need to, keep the phase in our relations with the key strategic partner. It's very important. It's not that we're arguing that United States have said that we're giving you 200 and Ukraine is saying, no, it's 100. No, it's not an arguing. It's not a dispute, but it's important that both countries and the taxpayers, they should know where their money are. So that's it. And I kept saying all the time, it's not that
It's just wild gum flapping at this point.
All right, so 200 billion from us, 150 billion from the UK, 102 billion from France. God knows how much Germany's poured down this fucking rabbit hole.
Well, and did you notice he began answering the previous question about the issue of corruption by saying, "Oh, we've allowed inspectors in, and there's been an audit, and we're fully transparent, and there's reports." That's a lie. There haven't been any reports. We've got a House of Representatives and a Senate full of people who would like to know what happened to all of our money. There haven't been any reports. I don't know what the hell that guy's talking about, unless he's just saying words because he thinks they sound good.
Yeah.
I would love to see these reports he's claiming that exist. I would read them right now.
I got nothing. Yeah, we'd be reading them right now. You're right.
Yeah, exactly.
not, properly responding to 200, 300, 400. No. I'm responding to what was the input, so to say, how many money came to Ukraine. Now, in terms of the use of those money, primarily that was for the weapons they were used on the battlefield. And the audit that I've mentioned clearly documented that whether this weapon was used on the battlefield or in accordance to some of the information been posted on the media. Primarily, that were the Russian narratives that some of the weapons were sent elsewhere, or there was some corruption related to this weapon, something was sold. No. All the audit that took place, not a single time has found any fact of sales of U.S. weapons to somewhere abroad. So there were no information like that in any of the audit. Then, secondly, the funding, they support the different social programs. That was different social programs, but the salary that we pay to our soldiers, the pensions that we pay to our pensioners, and we have 11.5 million pensioners. So
we don't care about your pensioners.
From the Ukraine.
Fuck me.
What? How did we end up in the pensioners things? Is this?
It's a hell of a good question. I have no idea. There was nothing in the question about fucking pensioners. It was, where the hell did our money go?
Is it possible that this pension scheme might have something to do with money laundering?
I would say there's a better than 100% chance of that.
Wow.
Probably 117, 118.
I would have accepted a non-zero possibility.
There is a non-zero possibility. Yeah, that's somewhere in the range of 100%.
Only by the Ukrainian money, not because we didn't need the kind of financial support or the support to the people. There were different aspects, infrastructural aspects, etc. We needed all of that, and we are grateful to all that. But the United States have to know that they were not feeding our pensioners and our soldiers with regards to the salary or the compensation. Surely you've provided the most important aspect, that is the weapons we needed to defend. Now, those things are very important. Now, there's special programs or separate programs, and we have the clear figures behind those. When the United States were paying money for the development of a certain direction in the technological kind of development, like in new drones, and there were direct funding either in the private sector that was constructing the drones like that. What the United States have received, well, the exchange of information. The United States, without the war, would never have received the knowledge. I'm not saying that war is good. That's horrible. But whenever we're saying what the United States have received, for example,
You little douche.
When the United States have funded.
He's trying to say, without this war, we wouldn't know how to build fucking drones. He said that with a straight face.
Yep.
And I don't have an adjective for how repugnant that is. But it gets worse. It still gets worse. It gets much, much worse.
The weapons, and they were transferring the Patriots to us, and we are grateful to the United States, first of all, for this. They know that all the air defense systems that we had, different shells, there's artillery shells, even 155 shells could be different, the HIMARS, etc. All the Ukraine have been using. Ukraine provided the reports to the United States, and Ukraine has improved many of the elements and specifications by our engineers, by our people on the ground. They've improved the specifications of the weapons. The United States have received a true report of.
So, you improved the specifications of some mid-60s weapons.
Yes, he is trying to argue that we have received such a gold mine of intellectual information from funding this war that we ought to be the ones thanking him. I mean, that's actually the impression that one gets here. And God, if you were trying to piss me off, dude, it worked.
That is basically and look at that face. Good God.
And also, it shouldn't go without being mentioned that since this interview went live the other day, there's been an additional meeting between Trump and Zelensky at the Pope's funeral, from which Trump emerged not being very confident about how much this guy actually desires a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Because now he's saying he wants total victory, he wants Ukraine's 1992 borders, and he's not willing to accept anything less. And that's madness. That's stark raving madness. That's not what a man says who wants a peaceful settlement.
Right.
That's what a man says who wants a forever war.
A forever war. Right.
based on the largest land war in many years. So now the United States know where to invest the money, where not to invest the money. I know those conclusions, but this is not public information. But the United States have received this knowledge, this data, and this knowledge could not be acquired without the live operations. Then the United States have provided money to the development of different drones. Surely it's all about our special forces, recon, intelligence, security service of Ukraine, foreign intelligence. These are the separate money. They are part of those 105 billion. So this is where the scientists were working, the recon, the intelligence, the military engineers were working. Now, what the United States have received, when the United States have paid for those developments, the United States have received complete and open information on the drones. This is the new weapons that was not available to the United States, to Europe, and surely we didn't have it. Now, the United States have received all this experience, all this know-how and developments. Now, I'm not willing to say that it's a cheap price for all of those developments. We are grateful to every single cent paid by the United States, but this is the fair price, so to say. The knowledge, the experience, that the whole world is based on the knowledge, and I believe that this is what the United States have received. Then how are
Yes, we are the lucky recipients of Ukrainian intellectual information.
Has this motherfucker ever heard of paintball?
I don't know. Probably. I mean, he was the Ukrainian Michael Scott. He seems like a guy who might play paintball.
Well, I'm just saying, all of the things he's talking about can be tested in a basic airsoft game.
Well, and he's actually he is making the quite laughable argument that you and I, the U.S. taxpayer, should be fine funding all this stuff in an open-ended fashion with no exit strategy, no off-ramp, no definition of victory, just because we're getting some new drone specs. I mean, How does that benefit you and I, the U.S. taxpayer, I would ask? I don't think it does in any material way, but that's the argument that he has decided to go with. And you can tell Shapiro is getting increasingly agitated here. He's got this look on his face like a man who knows he's having smoke blown up his ass and it's starting to annoy him.
Right. I can't wait. Oh, I'm so excited.
medics being operating on the battlefield. Everyone knows about this. There's medical points or medical stations close to the battlefield where the military surgeries are being taken place. There's medical assistance of different sort that is being provided. Now, all this knowledge, all this experience were transferred to our partners. They've seen that they could make conclusions. The support to the people, the United States, together with the Europeans, have provided the support to the people, and I can give you the conclusions. You can compare the number of killed and the number of casualties. Now, I'm not comparing the Russian army with the Ukrainian army, but look at the portion of the wounded in action and killed in action. We have the portion of the wounded in action the lowest. If we have 1 to 10, that is 1 killed, you have 10 wounded in action. Now, in case of Russians, in case of 10 casualties, there will be 5 wounded in action, or 5 killed in action, or 6 by 4. So we're saying that's a different level of medical support, and that knowledge was also provided to our partners. Now, what exactly the United States have received as well? This is the most important thing that I have not mentioned yet. Let's be frank. The people in the world, they believe that we are a living kind of fence against the Russia's invasion to the civilized world, including the NATO member nations. And we are kind of a living shield. We are defending this. So if Putin will come to the...
Did you hear how he just referred to it? He said Russia's invasion of the civilized world. That means we, Ukraine, are civilized people. The Russians are not. They're just Asiatic savages, apparently.
I'm getting some tip of the spear, edge of the knife, chest thumping vibes here.
As well you should, because you often do get those kind of vibes from people who are dictators for life, as this man effectively is now, especially if he continues getting the same level of support he's currently getting from the US and the EU. We are setting him up as a permanent dictator.
I don't like
I feel like there should be some kind of pressure to hold something resembling a democratic election here. You set a date for an election at least, and you can't keep permanently using the excuse that, oh, we're at war, we can't have an election. the United States and the United Kingdom both had general elections in 44 and 45 respectively, when they had voters deployed everywhere around the world, and they managed to get the job done with pencils and paper ballots. So you tell me how difficult it is having an election during wartime.
Facts.
The NATO member countries, or when it will do that. I don't believe that I know everything in advance, but let's just imagine, because everyone see who they have case with, so Putin might go to the European countries. Now, in this case, there would be a need to defend the European nations or to leave the NATO. I'm not saying whether the United States should be doing that or not. That's the choice made by the people of the United States and other allies, but this is a question that will definitely be on the agenda. So as long as Russians are not in any single NATO member nation, your families are not facing with this question. So there will be a major question for your families, either to send your child to the war or not, to the other country, to some foreign country.
Are you threatening me?
And I'm telling you right now, if it's his intention to hold out for Crimea being Ukrainian, that's a forever war, because that's never going to happen. I mean, they tried to have a little bit of an arrangement with Crimea after the breakup of the Soviet Union, but let's run through the thing again. Sevastopol has been the home port of Russia's Black Sea Fleet since 1750. Consequently, the population of Sevastopol and Crimea more broadly is made up of Russian people who are largely living there to support that navy and that fleet. And it's been that way for hundreds and hundreds of years. After the Soviet Union broke up, they tried to enter into an arrangement where Russia would rent, the southern tip of Crimea, where Sevastopol is. But frankly, if we're being honest, the Ukrainians did a pretty piss poor job of living up to the terms of that lease. And so that's where you get the annexation of Crimea 10 or 11 years ago.
Yeah. And I mean, it's always been a forever war since 92 or so.
Yeah.
So,
and even let's go back even farther, because you can't study this and understand it in a meaningful way without trying to have some historical perspective. The boundaries of Ukraine that came into effect with the breakup of the Soviet Union on Christmas Day 1991, they weren't drawn with any regard for the ethnicities of the people who lived in any of the particular regions, like Crimea, for example, or the Donbass, or Donetsk, or Luhansk. The divisions were drawn purely for the administrative convenience of the Soviet regime. It was never with a mind to this chunk of country might have to one day exist as a sovereign nation state. The lines were just as meaningless as the lines that the British and French drew in the Middle East after the First World War, whose consequences we are still grappling with right up to the present day.
Yeah. That's very succinct. This is well put.
So that's the kind of question. Now, the cost of the United States not searching, and the families are not searching for an answer to this complicated question of whether to send their son or daughter, whether they will return home, alive or wounded. Nobody knows the cost of that question. Whether the United States is the the richest economy in the world, whether this is the biggest amount paid for what's being provided. I'm not saying that's a small amount. I'm saying that this is fair. It's fair that United States supported Ukraine, and Ukraine gave away a lot in return for that support and assistance. And of course, the most precious thing we have is the life of our people.
So I want to get Russia's intentions in a moment and the possibilities of a ceasefire, but Americans have questions about things that are happening here. So there have been a lot of accusations that there's been a crackdown on religious freedom in Ukraine, particularly with regard to the Russian Orthodox Church.
We got a real doozy of an answer coming up here.
The wide variety of faiths. Maybe you can respond to the accusations that there's a restriction on religious freedom with regard to Russian Orthodox in Ukraine.
Well, first of all, I'm very happy that you're here. That you
Get
had a
ready to
chance
hear the word meetings a lot.
Really, we have a meeting like that a couple of
What?
times, and I truly visit some of the churchill sites. And during the Easter, there's the Eastern meetings and the Passover, and
Cool.
we have a meeting with all of our religious
Great.
institutions. And I believe that what Ukraine has, and that is the largest council of churches, the largest in Europe. All of our churches are united, different religions, and everyone is united. So we are considering the question. There is the problem in military chaplains, the mobilization
Hold up.
pastors, or not.
Homie's just saying, trust me, bro. He's saying it again.
He is absolutely ruining himself right now, and we are not even to the worst part of this answer yet. The worst part of this answer is when he basically says right out loud, well, I had to ban the Russian Orthodox Church because it's run by the fucking KGB. And he actually unironically uses the term KGB as if there is a KGB, which there isn't. There hasn't been a KGB in 33 years. And it's pretty
Right.
wild stuff.
Yeah. More salad. You bring dressing?
or there's different questions. We help one another.
Ukrainian vinaigrette.
They're on the front line. It could be only through their
Ukrainian
will
net.
voluntarily, and they should be supporting military. Now, those religious actors, if they're willing to do that, we are kind of considering every single question. We do not believe that these are the major challenges because we are having meetings. And if you have a regular meeting, so if you have a
Right.
regular, and all the big challenges, they kind of remain, but only small ones. And in many cases, we solve those challenges, but they're not catastrophic. They're not tragic for the country and for the religious unity that we have in Ukraine. And we are openly doing that. Now, they advocate what you've heard, like abroad. They have one single voice, different faith, but single voice. Nobody's pressing anyone. So today, Sviatoslav went to prepare to. He went to Rome, and there's all those ceremonies around the Pope Francis. So Sviatoslav went there. Went to Rome. He needs that's correct, and I'm also planning together with my wife to have a visit. We'll have several meetings around the same dates. Now, as for the pressure, there's no pressure, and you will never hear about anything about the pressure because we don't have any additional dialogues with our religious institutions or religious leaders. There's no shadow practices. We're absolutely open, transparent. There could be cameras. We're no cameras. We're absolutely open. Everyone can tell you there's no pressure. That's non-existent, and every holidays we are together. We have people from different religions, and we're always inviting everyone. That's important. As for the Moscow Church, look,
Can I
The
comment
Moscow
on that?
Church. He calls it the Moscow Church.
Yeah, but that Prussian statement, you see, once upon a time there were Prussians.
Yeah, there sure were.
There stopped being Prussians around a particular event what took place not too terrible long ago, and suddenly Prussians,
1870.
right? Suddenly they're Ukrainians, not, or were they Crimeans? I can't remember how that panned out, but Prussia lost everything because some lines on the map got moved.
Well, Prussia just became the hegemon of the newly unified Germany. It used to be that Germany was made up of three kingdoms. You had the King of Prussia, the King of Bavaria, and the King of Brandenburg, and then you had a few dozen little principalities and margravites and electorates and all those little political units that used to exist back in the Middle Ages. And at the end of the Franco-Prussian War in 1870, then they consolidated all of that into a country called Germany, which had never existed up until that point. And the previous king of Prussia became what was called the Emperor of Germany. And there was Wilhelm I and then Wilhelm II, who was the final one. They only had two, obviously, because the monarchy ended when they lost the First War. But yeah, that's how things shook out in Germany.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying is like Prussia ceased being Prussia by their own fault. I mean, they did the thing.
But they only agreed to that so that they would be the hegemon of the new country and their king would be the king of the whole thing.
Right.
Or the emperor of
Yeah.
the whole thing, as the case may be.
I gotcha.
church. The question is that in case of Russia, Moscow is just another agency of the KGB. Everyone knows that Russia's special services are in control of the churches. Well, this is how they are.
Everybody knows that Russia's special services are in control of the church. He just said that out loud. That is his justification for jailing religious clerics and shutting down churches.
Right.
While also saying that he totally sparkly hearts religious freedom and we're all completely united and all of our churches love each other. You sleazy little douchey little liar.
I couldn't have said it better myself.
That or not, well, that's their choice. That's their right. And we've never raised this question before the war and during the war, but that's a fact. That their special services are in control of the church. The problem was that their special forces was in control of the churches in Ukraine. That's not the truth. The church should be equal, and the Moscow could not be in control of our church. Their KGB, their intelligence could not be in control or could not be managing.
There's KGB again.
Well, they shouldn't be here. So the legislative changes in Ukraine are related to the fact that there could be no connection in between of the Moscow and the church. Nobody closed anything or anyone, but it can't be the case that Russia's KGB is in control of the church in Ukraine. Everyone is against this legal ties. So it's not only about the ties at the level of intelligence. There was a legal connection, legal ties for many years, but that shouldn't be the case. We shouldn't be having disputes or controversies around whose church is older than the others. And Ukraine is not shouldn't be speaking about this. Look, we're sitting here close to the Sofia Cathedral. Sofia is older than Russia's capital city and any churches they have.
Who cares?
And that's the answer. We shouldn't be having any disputes. We have scientific evidences. We're just saying that our church should be free from any authorities. It's free for the people.
So one of the other questions that's been asked is about military mobilization. So, obviously you're in the middle of a war. At the same time, there have been reports online that people are being picked up off the streets in places in eastern Ukraine and recruited into services. How do you respond to accusations and videos like that?
Дивіться,
Look,
кожен випадок.
every single case.
All right.
He is talking about two concepts that are mutually exclusive of one another. He's saying, well, of course I have to ban the Russian Orthodox Church because it's run by the KGB in Moscow. But he's also saying, I will accept no conditions for peace except a return to Ukraine's 1992 borders, including all of the ethnically Russian areas that are full of Russian Orthodox believers whose residents would rather be Russian citizens. You can't ban their church and keep these people as your citizens with full rights. Though those two things cancel each other out, dude. And how can you say this shit out loud without realizing that? That's part of the reason why I find it impossible any longer to take this man seriously as a broker on the world diplomatic stage.
I suspect. All right. Well, to begin with, when the war broke out in Ukraine, the very first thing I said was, wait, aren't there a bunch of Russians in Ukraine?
Exactly.
I was like, yeah, they're going to have to get out. I'm like, but they're like 47% of Ukraine? And he just stared.
And aren't we kind of talking about ethnic cleansing at that point?
He stared at me and was like, where did you get that number? I was like, I don't know. I read stuff, dude. He's like, I don't know if it's that high. I said, yeah, no, it's probably higher if I had to guess. I mean, especially the farther north you get, the farther east you get, the number increases. So, like,
yeah, because I'm sorry, I know it's an icky term that people don't like, but there is no way around it. If you are proposing that all people of a certain ethnicity should be ejected from a certain country, there is nothing else to call that but ethnic cleansing.
I can't disagree, but at least he didn't take the previous route, as far as we know so far.
I guess that's something.
I mean, it ain't nothing.
Is scrutinized by the land forces, by the Ministry of Defense. They're the one responsible for the mobilization. And it can have a different attitude towards mobilization, but we have this mobilization from the beginning of the war. It's in accordance to the legislation, accordance to the martial law period. So the country is in a war. That is why we do have mobilization. We want the war to end. We want everything to end. We want to have a fair peace, calmness, and there would be nothing, not the mobilization, not the martial law. But as long as the war, as long as we have the law, there is the mobilization. That is why there were different aspects, like someone suggested money, someone took money for going or not going to the army. There's different approaches, or there are different cases, but we shouldn't be saying that this is the major case or the main thing that describes Ukraine today. No, Ukraine has 800,000 right now, or 600,000 people who volunteered to go to the army. That was the law on mobilization, but the people were volunteering to go.
Did he say that was the law on the mobilization?
He is using the word mobilization a hell of a lot now. And he's using it in several different senses all at once, and it makes it very difficult. I don't know if this is on him or the translator, but it makes it very difficult to ascertain what he's actually trying to say.
Right, okay. All right. It's not just me.
No, definitely not.
Okay.
And defend Ukraine. Definitely, there's different people, and I think there's different people in every country, and the law enforcement personnel should be making sure that everything would be transparent. There would be no coercion or something. There are some kind of disadvantages. That's a fact. We shouldn't be hiding that, like a corruption. But if we have any anti-corruption bodies, there's the security service of Ukraine is. If we're fighting with this on an everyday basis, well, of course you can hide it, like everything, as in case of Russia or some European countries. But Ukraine clearly shows that it is fighting on a constant basis against aspects like that. But those are kind of singular cases. This is not massive. That's more important, and that should be reducing on a daily basis. We're doing that.
As we mentioned,
There's nothing there. No,
it is the rhetorical version of tofu. It is only there to take up space and distract you from its own non-existence.
Yeah, it's just there's no meaning to anything that was just spoken. He's
no,
yet again he's saying, "Trust me, bro."
Yes, there is a lot of trust me, bro here. Oh, I'm your ally. They're your enemy. We're fine, dude. We got this. I did my own internal audit. Your money's all good. Trust me. Take my word for it. We're cool.
Yeah.
Just keep those checks coming in. We'll be fine. I'll let you know what victory looks like. I'll get back to you on when the next election is. Just don't worry.
Right. I think that was the last question for this segment.
Yeah, I think it was.
well, folks, we'll get to all the news plus the second part of my interview with President
Would you
Zelensky.
shut up for 5 freaking minutes while I do this correctly? So far, basically what we've gotten to is he doesn't want to answer questions. He gets irritated when people mention money, and think of all the wonderful technology you're going to get from the outdated shit that you sent us that we improved.
He doesn't want to talk about what happens to the money. He doesn't want to talk about religious persecution. He doesn't want to talk about what victory looks like. He doesn't want to talk about when the next election is, which makes it difficult for me to take you seriously as a man who wants to be the shining pinnacle of world democracy.
Facts. Absolute facts. See if we get past the advertisements. Right in there.
Yeah, I think part 2 starts. Yeah, there it is. You got it.
Yeah, it pops up pretty good. It's good douche. So we're not going to make it through all of this. There's no way. But
we don't need to, because it's all the same shit.
Yeah, exactly. It's going to be a whole bunch. I'm more interested in the questions that he gets asked than I am in the answers at this point.
Yeah, and I'm also fascinated by the questions that weren't asked. It makes me wonder if there were preconditions on the interview. And of course, obviously, it's impossible to know one way or the other, but the interview is taking place after, the Ukrainians have been whining and dining the Shapiro and his crew around Kiev for a couple of days. So traditionally, when during situations like that, you might cozy up to the guy and say, maybe go easy on me in the interview tomorrow. Maybe don't ask me this question or that question. Things like that happen all the time, every day. And often when Western journalists are granted interviews with foreign dictators, preconditions are often attached to it. Like every time freaking 60 Minutes went and interviewed Fidel Castro, there was all kinds of preconditions on those interviews, even though the CBS people pretended there weren't. There were. And I have the same wonder about this one.
I got the hiccups.
Different arguments that have been made by Vladimir Putin that have now been picked up by some people in the United States about the nature of Ukraine. Obviously, Putin has suggested that Ukraine is a Nazi regime, that there ought to be denazification. Simultaneously, he has suggested that Ukraine is a wild hotbed of social leftism, very big on transgenderism, same-sex marriage, abortion. How do you respond to those two varying accusations about Ukraine itself?
Смешно.
Well,
Laugh it up, fuzzball.
I need to hear about this from Putin. I mean, and addressing that to me, any talks about Nazism directed to me, through his actions, he came very close to the results of the Nazi regime that was dominating in Europe like 100 years ago. And Putin is coming very close through the actions of his armed forces, like particularly in the first days of the full-scale war, because in the beginning, when they were like in the very beginning of this full-scale invasion, they were raping people, they were killing people, they were doing everything. And a good example is your meeting. I was told that you had a meeting with the main rabbi.
Yes.
Помалысостыш.
So you had a meeting. So do you think he's an adequate person?
Seems like a nice
Do you
rabbi.
think he's an adequate person?
Він
Absolutely adequate.
All right.
I think he's
All
a
right.
heroic
Well, and-
person. He's a heroic.
This
That is another. Go ahead.
this may bring into question the veracity of the translation. An adequate person. I'm sure that's a perfect translation for the word from Russian, but
Ukrainian.
okay, all right. I mean,
Some people don't think there's a difference. I have no dog in that race.
yeah, I know there is a difference, but it's like the difference between talking to somebody in Tennessee versus talking to somebody in freaking Wisconsin.
Yeah, exactly. It's more dialectical than linguistic, you might say.
Exactly. So, an adequate person.
Well, and it's also, I think, a further indication of an interview subject getting flustered when they start trying to turn questions back around on the interviewer. This is the first time we see it happening in this interview, and it happens a couple more times afterward.
Okay, all right, all right. I'll play it out. All right, adequate.
His son is a Jew. Their family, there's a Jew. It's a Jew family, but his son went to war. Do you think whether his son would be fighting for a Nazi regime? That's not adequate. What Putin is saying, the Jews, they can't be fighting for the Nazi regime. The main rabbi cannot be sending his
Wait,
son.
hold on. Let me
to the
translate
war,
this for you, folks. I just realized what he's saying. I have friends that are Jews. We can't be Nazis.
Yes, we can't be Nazis because I've got a rabbi who's my friend. So boom, bitches.
I know some black guys, so I can't be racist.
Exactly. Some of my best friends are black guys. That is exactly what this is. That is an outstanding call, my friend.
Yes, sir.
Nazi regime, and there's many a lot. That I have some of the ancestors Jews, and telling that Ukrainians are Nazis, that I'm a Nazi, and that I represent the Kiev Nazi regime. Look, it's kind of it's primitive. I think he should, come up with some differing evidences or arguments, or at least something, because we have thousands of evidences of a Nazi regime of Putin and the consequences of his war against us. The recognition of his war, of his regime as accountable to the International Criminal Court. There's the deportation of Ukrainian children, which is recognized by the whole world. And some of the leaders close to him, these are the leaders who always had some tight relations, the economic relations with Russia. Those on the Middle East, those somewhere in the global south, even these leaders, even they are fighting for Putin to return back our children, because the abdication of children, taking them away from their relatives, even those children who lost their parents during this war, but taking those children away from the grandparents. I'm sorry, that is something that is truly more like modern Nazis, but that's not like Ukrainian Nazis at all.
How do you
With the Nazi talk, we are witnessing a phenomenon that has existed here in our country for some time, but apparently it exists in Eastern Europe also, where in all of our societies somehow, since the end of the Second War, we no longer have any convenient shorthand for what pure evil looks like, except to call people Nazis and compare them to Hitler. It's the only thing we know how to do anymore. And that's too bad, because it never takes the conversation to a useful place. There's been plenty of evil men and evil regimes in history that you could compare modern day events to. It doesn't always have to be Hitler and the Nazis and Hitler and the Nazis. We use Hitler and Nazis today in the same way that for hundreds of years before our time, it was Satan and the devil that occupied that post. When you wanted to make a shorthand reference to pure evil, you talked about freaking Satan or the devil. You didn't talk about Hitler and the Nazis. But as we have become all of our societies increasingly secularized, we have replaced that with Nazis and Hitler. And it certainly has not helped our discourse, not one little bit.
That you're not wrong. It's been overblasted, overblown, overdone, overused to such an extent that you just said it 37 times in a live stream.
Yeah, Donald Trump can't say or do one single thing without someone saying, "Oh, he's literally Hitler. This is just like the Nazis." He could issue a happy. Go ahead.
Ukraine is actually just a
Hold on, let me back that up. Too far.
Not like Ukrainian Nazis at all.
How do you respond to the counter-accusation, which is that Ukraine is actually just a repository of Western decadence, that it's a decadent country, that's liberal, and that is embracing all these socially leftist causes, and therefore conservatives in the United States, for example, should not care about Ukraine because really Russia is more religious conservative power?
Look, first and foremost, the people of Ukraine, we shouldn't be forcing Ukrainian people to do anything. That's the major kind of aspect,
including the military draft
for themselves. We don't have any difficulties regarding the human rights, or no challenges regarding that, because that's the main law for those people. Why the Ukrainians are fighting against Russians? Not because these are Russians, absolutely not, but because someone, and in this case Russians, came and started to force you. If tomorrow we'll be told,
wait a second, we're not fighting the Russians just because they're Russians, but we're fighting because someone who happened to be Russian happened to come and try to force us to do stuff.
Yeah, it's a hell of a thesis.
that there's inequality.
While out the other side of his mouth, he's telling us we have to hate the Russians.
Yeah. No, that's the part I was picking up on exactly.
Ukrainians. The Ukrainians will be fighting for their own rights. That's kind of the emotional phase of the Ukrainians. The Ukrainians are free, and we are not kind of limiting Ukrainians because you can't do that. You shouldn't be doing that because Ukrainians will be against that. That's it, and it's everywhere. I mean, it's in the gender equality. It's in all matters related to religious choice, how to live, with whom to live, how many children would you like to have? You want a lot of children? Okay, we'll be supporting that. We are supporting that. This is very important to us. Just now I had a meeting.
Okay. But no one cares.
And if you again, I'm going to revisit the point because it warrants revisiting. If your only acceptable end state is total victory, 1992 borders, then without resorting to ethnic cleansing and mass expulsions, you are going to have to figure out a way for your ethnically Russian citizens to be able to go to their Russian Orthodox church without you throwing their pastors in jail or whatever the hell they're called, or clergymen, he's arguing things that are incompatible with one another, and this is not the first example in this interview. There might have been half a dozen. it makes one wonder if he has any sort of coherent philosophy going on between his ears, and I'm not certain he does.
I can't hear a whole lot of coherence in these answers.
And the sentences get more and more fragmented. It's almost sometimes like listening to a Joe Biden interview, like the proverbial kitten chasing the laser pointer. Like your mind just flits from one thought to another thought to another thought and another thought, and you begin 20 sentences in a row and you never finish any of them. And that's the look that he is projecting increasingly as this interview goes on.
Cocaine.
Meeting. They're
No,
saying
Doug.
you need to reinforce the Institute of Family because of the war and plus 8.5 million Ukrainians left the country. So the birth rate is decreasing, and we need to reinforce that. This is the signals that they are transmitting. We are sharing those signals among the people. And I'm convinced that if you're not exerting any pressure on Ukrainians, if you have a dialogue with Ukrainians, then you can agree on everything. But as long as you, or if you are starting to force Ukrainians, or if you could start to press on the Ukrainians' dignity or Ukrainians' rights, then Ukraine will kind of turn around very fast. The Russians, they could be friendly to Ukrainians. They could be doing so, and for many years that was the case. But the problem of Russians is that they want to have Russian world everywhere. They're not respecting you, your language, your identity. They want everyone to be the same. They are saying that Ukraine does not exist. Look, they came, and most of the people who died, I mean Ukrainians who died, that was in the east of Ukraine. This is where the family were half Russian, half Ukrainian, and where the families were speaking primarily with Russian language, but most of the families like that, they were living in the east. Now, how had Russians supported the development of their own language or culture? Nothing. No. Now,
Wait.
And look,
What?
let's call things what they are. If you were trying to draw the borders of a nation state that primarily encompasses only Ukrainian people, you wouldn't have Crimea in it. You wouldn't have Donetsk and Luhansk and the Donbass. You wouldn't have any of those regions if that was your aim in drawing up the borders, which it was not, as we previously discussed. So
Right.
your idea of victory is incompatible with what you say you want your country to be.
He just said out loud that the Russians have done nothing to increase Russian culture. That's what stopped me. Did you catch that bit? What are the Russians doing to benefit Russian culture? Nothing. And I'm like,
Well, and just not long ago, he was haranguing the Russians for trying to stamp out the Ukrainian language and Ukrainian national identity. So which one is it?
right. Both, obviously, because of mental gymnastics.
Yes.
that's a totally different situation. Now the people are hating them. Even those people who had some family relationship or had some ties with Russia because of the border. But now there's a different attitude because the Russians have brought death. Because in this case, you'll be hating these people because that person that people kind of killed members of your family or brought hatred upon your land. That's why the attitude.
So now I want to talk about negotiations and Russia's ambitions here. So you've already accepted an immediate 30-day ceasefire. The Russians refused to accept a 30-day ceasefire or even a one-day ceasefire. They put together a fake one-day ceasefire for Easter, and then they proceeded to send drones all over the eastern part of Ukraine. The Russian ambitions here, how do you interpret those ambitions? I mean, Vladimir Putin has suggested that Ukraine is a fake state, that it needs to be removed from the map, it needs to be completely taken over. And he's talked about how the Soviet Empire, the great geopolitical disaster, was the destruction of the Soviet Empire, not because he's a Soviet, but because he believes that sort of the Russian imperial spirit requires empire, and Ukraine is the big sort of moat in his eye. He can't get over it. Given that position from President Putin, do you believe that he will be satisfied with the ceasefire that solidified the lines currently where they are, or do you think that he's looking for more?
Давайте будемо з вами прагматичні.
Let's be pragmatic. Let's not try to take into account only this desires of Putin. And it's not serious to speak to such a large country that it does not exist. You know,
To such a large country that it does not exist.
And this is pie in the sky nonsense. Who cares if they think your country doesn't exist? Your country obviously does exist. So what are we doing here?
Okay, so the question is, do you see a way forward with the lines on the map where they stand today?
Yes, and he does not get a direct response at all.
There's kind of tens of millions of people living here in Ukraine, and there's tens of millions of Ukrainians are living around the globe, and that many Ukrainians will not allow him to change the history. He wants that, but that's impossible. Whenever we're talking about tens of millions of people, you can't simply keep it somewhere in shadow and rewrite everything. He can control the information flow in his country totally, and this is where he rewrites the history of the whole world. And I can assure you, his ambitions will grow. If Ukraine will not withstand, then he will go on, and surely he already has the textbooks of history who tells who is the real owner of the territory of Poland, Hungary, etc. So he will move on. That's why I told you, that's be pragmatic. We need to stop Putin in order not to take any risk. I mean, for the world not to take any risk, first thing. And that is why we talked about NATO, about your families, about the Europeans. Why the world should take any risks for not taking any risks, for people not to be in fear. You need to stop them. We need to stop him for not destroying us. We are fighting for our survival, and you are fighting not only for our survival, but for your risks, for this possible but large risks. I'm not asking.
I feel like he's been playing a lot of tabletop games.
We've got 5 minutes left. Can I briefly throw out a thesis? Here's what I think might ultimately happen with the history of Europe in the 21st century. I'm not going to be around for it, so I won't be here to find out if I was right or wrong. However, much as the history of the 20th century in Europe was about going away from monarchy and toward non-monarchical forms of government, I think the history of the 21st century, to some extent, is going to see a drift back toward monarchy. I think 50 or 75 years from now, you might have a few, maybe more than several countries in Central Europe that used to have monarchies re-proclaiming their monarchies. And I think Russia is a candidate for that too, because let's recall what happened in Spain. Spain has a civil war in the 1930s. Franco and the fascists win. Franco rules as the fascist dictator until he dies in the mid-70s. Shortly before his death, everybody expects that he's going to name another fascist dictator as his successor, but he doesn't do that. He says, we're bringing back the royal family. And so we get King Juan Carlos I, and since then, King Felipe. I think that might happen in Russia. The dream of Russian nationalism hasn't really changed in the last 800 or 900 years. The dream of Russian imperial nationalism says that if all of the Slavic peoples are united under Russian political hegemony, then the Slavic peoples can be a major world power. Which they actually achieved for about 4.5 decades after the Second World War. But I think Putin is of the mind that the thing that made that fail was communism. But if we could bring back the old czarist times, if we could re-proclaim the czar and go back to a monarchical model, then we might be able to make that model of Russian Empire actually work. And so it would not surprise me. Just as it was a big surprise when Boris Yeltsin brought out Vladimir Putin one day in 2000 and said, this is the guy that's going to succeed me. Nobody had ever heard of this son of a bitch before. And I think Putin might do something equally unexpected when everyone expects him to come out and appoint a successor or an heir apparent or a president in waiting. He might say, we're going to bring back the Tsar. We're going to bring back the glory of Russian imperialism. We're going to achieve everything we want to achieve that we screwed up last time because communism was just too big of an albatross that kept us from realizing the project. That's it for my thesis.
That's not bad. I like it. I'm not sure. I don't trust anyone involved in any of it. But
neither.
Between two individuals and the translations I've read a few transcripts. I hate to be that guy, But I put more trust in the things that I've read from Putin than I do in Zelensky. Zelensky's like a washing machine and flip-flops whatever he's saying based on whoever he's talking to, and not very well.
Yeah, and Putin does a similar thing that we see Zelensky doing here in terms of just saying lots of words and running out the clock and trying to, avoid many very direct responses. But at least Putin does it in a way that is composed of coherent sentences that follow all along one from the other, and not what Zelensky does, which is just fragment after fragment after fragment because he's a kitten chasing a laser pointer. It's a really stark difference, and it makes me take one guy more seriously and one guy less seriously, and I think that's perfectly well warranted.
Yeah, no, I got nothing against none of that. None of it. I mean, it's like I said, it's freaking. You got two people to choose, and you got two people to choose from, and only one can be the one you support, and that's it. Who do you trust? Take your shot.
Whom do you trust? Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us on the Blast Radius tonight. We sure do like it when you spend this little chunk of your Sunday evenings here with us. We hope you have a great day and a pleasant tomorrow and a fantastic remainder of your week. I thought it was a very illuminating discussion tonight. It went well. Hopefully everyone came away from it edified and with their intellect bolstered. And if not, then maybe next time. We will see you next week. Same bat time, same bat channel. Until then, see you next time. Get off my lawn.
Give me the money. Give me the money.